Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Nate Harding fled suburbia for peace and open skies, he thought he'd left HOA drama behind. But when a hidden pipeline slices through his land, trespassing turns into a full-blown war. One man, one fence line, and a battle that proves some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. My name's Nate Harding. I'm 38 years old, an engineer by trade, and a man who takes pride in his independence. A few years ago, I walked away from the noise, the HOA newsletters, the chirping of synthetic suburbia. I bought myself 12 acres of honest land on the edge of Collin County, Texas. Rolling fields, a stream along the southern border, a wide blue sky over an old tin-roofed barn. That's my paradise. No neighbors peeking through blinds. No bylaws about what shade of beige your fence can be. Just freedom. I'd heard whispers about the Stonebrook Ranch HOA. Their community started sprouting like mold across the highway about a mile up. It looked like someone copy-pasted the same house 100 times and planted matching trees like chess pieces. Once or twice, I got a glossy pamphlet in the mailbox. "Enhance your property value with our beautification initiative," it said. I tossed it straight in the recycling, alongside other unsolicited dreams. My land was off-grid, off paper, off their radar, or so I thought. It was after a few heavy days of rain. I was walking the property like I usually do, checking the runoff near the south side where the ground dips close to the creek. I'd built a little natural spillway there, so I like to keep an eye on it. As I stepped through the grass, I noticed something strange. Long stretches of turned soil, fresh, like a mole had been joyriding with a backhoe. The line was too straight to be natural. I stopped and knelt down, brushing away some mud. That's when I saw it. A PVC pipe. Bright white, thick, fresh, still a little damp from installation. And not just that. A red and yellow plastic flag sticking out of the ground about every 15 feet, labeled Property of HOA, Do Not Remove. I stood there for a full minute, motionless, staring at that marker like it had personally insulted my mother. My pulse climbed. My first instinct. Maybe this was some utility crew mistake. A fluke, a miscommunication. But as I followed the line with my eyes and feet, it became clear this was deliberate. A long, winding trench started near my south fence line and continued straight through the back edge of my land. Someone had dug through my private property, without asking, without telling, without so much as a knock on my damn door. A hot flush spread through my chest. As an engineer, I know what it takes to plan infrastructure like this. This wasn't a happy accident. This was intentional. Someone had to design it, sign off on it, and build it, all while pretending I didn't exist. I pulled out my phone, snapped photos, dropped GPS pins, and took a slow video walk down the full stretch of pipe. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a white-hot mix of disbelief and rising fury. Someone had decided that my land was just a shortcut, a convenience, like I was too far off the grid to notice, or too quiet to care. They'd made one hell of a mistake. I didn't know exactly who was behind this yet, but I was damn sure I was going to find out. I didn't wait long to act. The moment I got back to the house, I downloaded my footage to my laptop, time-stamped everything, and printed a copy of my property deed. Then I called the sheriff's department. No 911 drama. I wasn't looking to light a fire, just to report a very clear, very illegal trespassing and unauthorized excavation on private land. The dispatcher was polite but skeptical at first, until I mentioned construction materials and infrastructure being installed without permits. That got her attention. 2 deputies showed up that afternoon. Good guys, respectful, no-nonsense types. I led them down to the south side, stepping through the muddy edge of my field where the ground had been disturbed. As soon as they saw the flags and the exposed piping, one of them let out a low whistle. "Looks like someone's been busy," he muttered. "Busy committing a felony," I replied, handing him the property map and pointing to the boundary lines. "This is mine, all of it." They had no permission to be here. They started taking notes, snapping photos of their own. And then, like clockwork, a white Audi Q7 pulled up at the end of my private road, kicking up dust. The license plate read STN-BRK1. The driver's door popped open and out stepped a woman dressed like she was heading to a golf club lunch. Fitted blazer, pearls, and a clipboard tucked under one arm. She moved like someone used to having their way. "Mr. Harding?" she asked, voice oozing condescension. "That's me," I said, not offering a handshake. She turned to the deputies with a pleasant, overly practiced smile. "Officers, I'm Karen Dupre, president of the Stonebrook Ranch Homeowners Association. I believe there's been some sort of misunderstanding." The lead deputy crossed his arms. "Ma'am, can you explain why there are active utility lines being installed on this man's private property without permits?" Karen gave a light laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Oh, that. Just a contractor error. They must have misread the boundary coordinates. It's barely a few feet over the line. We're more than happy to fix it." I stepped forward. "You didn't just cross a few feet. You carved a whole trench clear across the southern edge. You installed pipe, set flags, and connected to your infrastructure. That's not a mistake. That's a plan." Her smile tightened. "Mr. Harding, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be." The contractors acted on what they thought were correct maps. Nobody was trying to deceive anyone. "Then why is the pipe already connected to your HOA drainage system?" I asked. That hit her. Her eyes flicked for a second, a little tell. The deputy raised his brow. "Is that true?" Karen folded her arms, still composed. "Look, I don't have the exact engineering report on hand, but we're willing to remove the segment that crossed on to Mr. Harding's land. There's no reason to escalate this." I could feel my jaw clench. The gall of this woman to show up and try to pretend this was all just some innocent mix-up, but the evidence said otherwise. The trench was straight, deliberate. The flags bore the HOA's name, and the pipe wasn't just laid, it was already doing its job. The deputies told Karen they'd be filing a report and that the matter could involve civil or criminal review, depending on what the county building department and DA decided. Karen turned to me as if I was supposed to be grateful. "We'll take care of it quietly. No need for lawyers." I looked her straight in the eye. Too late for quiet. After Karen's half-hearted apology and even more half-hearted promises to clean things up, I knew better than to trust a word of it. That woman oozed strategic charm, all smiles and apologies on the surface, but underneath, she was calculating. This wasn't about a contractor going rogue. This was coordinated, and I was going to prove it. First stop was the county assessor's office. I walked in with my survey map, deed in hand, and asked to see any recent permits or requests associated with the parcel lines around my southern boundary. The clerk, a wiry man with reading glasses hanging on a chain, scrolled through his system, paused, then narrowed his eyes at the screen. "There was a rejected application from Stonebrook Ranch HOA," he said. "They wanted to install a drainage line through municipal greenbelt land south of your property, but the request was denied. That land's protected. It's part of the watershed buffer zone." My gut tightened. I asked to see the full request and rejection letter. Sure enough, in small print, the HOA acknowledged alternate routing may be explored at HOA's discretion, pending private landowner cooperation. Except they hadn't gotten my cooperation. They'd just decided to skip that part. Next, I had my lawyer, Joe McCall, an old buddy from college and a real pitbull in boots, draft a request under the Texas Public Information Act for any HOA internal communications involving my property. Took a few days, but what came back made my blood boil. There were emails between Karen and a construction foreman detailing a backup route through the undeveloped private parcel, that'd be me, and plans to expedite approval by commencing work without formal notice. One email from Karen herself said, "The owner hasn't participated in HOA discussions and doesn't respond to outreach. If we proceed quietly and complete the job before anyone notices, we'll avoid drama." Drama was coming, lady, but that wasn't the worst of it. At the HOA's monthly board meeting, which I attended after pulling some strings and walking in with my attorney, Karen doubled down, trying to play the whole thing off like I was the one overreacting. She stood at the podium in a beige pantsuit that screamed corporate leadership cosplay and said with syrup in her voice, "Mr. Harding has a lovely piece of land, but it's currently unused and unmanaged in a way that impacts the community. Our improvements benefit all of Stonebrook Ranch, including our neighbors, whether they're official members or not." She actually got a few nods from the board. That's when I stood up, held up a copy of the email trail, and calmly asked, "Do any of you recall approving a plan that involved unauthorized construction through my legally protected property, or were you all content to let Karen steamroll the law on your behalf?" The room went quiet, except for one board member who immediately pulled out his phone and started scrolling like his life depended on it. My attorney stepped forward and reminded them that what they'd done wasn't just unethical, It was actionable. Karen, still holding on to her faux charm, tried to pivot with a smile. I'm sure there's a way to resolve this amicably. Perhaps a private settlement. We're open to discussing a financial offer for the inconvenience. Translation, a bribe. Right there, in front of a room full of her own board. I could feel the heat rise in my face. Not from the offer itself, but from the assumption that I'd fold. That I'd take a check and keep my mouth shut like it was all a minor bump in the road. I took a deep breath and said, loud enough for the room to hear, I'm not interested in your money. I'm interested in holding you accountable. Karen blinked. One of the board members audibly sighed. I didn't flinch. That night, as I stood on the porch looking out over the dark edge of the southern fence line, I felt the full weight of what I was stepping into. This wasn't just about a pipe anymore. This was about the principle, about the arrogance of people who thought they could bulldoze boundaries, literally and figuratively, and wrap it in the name of community benefit. Well, they picked the wrong landowner this time. After everything I'd uncovered, the unauthorized construction, the email trail, the attempted hush money, I knew I couldn't let it slide. Karen and her little HOA syndicate had trespassed, tampered, and lied. I wasn't about to let them patch up a few holes and pretend nothing happened. So I did what they never expected. I lawyered up, and I hit back hard. Joe McCall, my attorney, nearly choked on his coffee when I handed him the folder. You've got them dead to rights, he said, flipping through the emails, maps, and permit records. This isn't just a civil issue. This has teeth. Sharp ones. Within a week, we'd filed a civil lawsuit in district court seeking $500,000 in damages for unauthorized land use, property invasion, and ecological disruption. That last one mattered more than they realized. The creek they'd tapped into wasn't just any waterway. It fed into a protected watershed, which meant we had reason to involve the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. We did. At the same time, we submitted a formal complaint to the county prosecutor's office, including the evidence of fraud, forged maps, emails detailing deceit, and the fact that construction had occurred without my consent or legal permits. That turned heads. I got a call from a district investigator within 48 hours. This isn't just a civil nuisance, he said flatly. This looks like criminal conspiracy to commit fraud and trespass with environmental implications. We're opening a file. Karen must have felt the walls tightening because the very next day, a courier showed up at my gate with a manila envelope and a note that read, "Let's resolve this like neighbors." Inside, a new offer, $25,000, tax-free, if I agreed to relinquish any legal claims and allow the pipe to stay in place until a permanent solution was approved. I didn't even respond. I just scanned it, added it to the evidence pile, and sent a digital copy to the prosecutor. Meanwhile, the media started sniffing around. A local environmental reporter contacted me after seeing a post about it on a community forum. I gave him a simple quote, "If you let someone dig through your land once, they'll never stop. That's not community, that's conquest." As weeks passed, subpoenas started flying. The contractor was called in for questioning, and sure enough, he cracked. Under pressure, he admitted that Karen had authorized the dig, instructing them to proceed off record and assuring him that the landowner wouldn't care. Karen's emails to him, now in official hands, painted the full picture. At this point, Stonebrook Ranch HOA's board went into full damage control. Their lawyer tried to offer a confidential mediation, saying they wanted to minimize disruption to the community. I laughed. They didn't care about disruption. They cared about exposure. My final move before court was symbolic, but powerful. I installed a wide trail cam setup along the southern line and placed a large wooden sign, hand-painted and weatherproofed, right in view of where the pipe had been buried. It read, "This is not HOA land. This is not your shortcut. This is mine. Try again. And bring a lawyer." The war was legal now, and I was ready. The air inside the county courthouse felt electric, the kind of quiet that buzzes just beneath the skin, like a summer storm waiting to break. After months of preparation, statements, legal volleys, and layers of bureaucratic maneuvering, it was finally time to face them. Not just Karen, but the entire smug-suited board of Stonebrook Ranch HOA. They'd tried to stonewall, delay, even deflect blame onto their own contractor, but now the subpoenas had been served, and it was showtime. The deposition room wasn't big, but the tension inside made it feel like a pressure cooker. Karen sat across from me, flanked by two HOA attorneys who looked like they billed by the syllable. She wore her usual air of polished arrogance, but it cracked around the edges. Her hands twitched slightly each time a new document was handed to her, especially the one with her signature authorizing alternate routing through unoccupied land to expedite community drainage needs. Joe, my lawyer, leaned in just enough to press the issue. Ms. Dupre, can you explain how unoccupied land applies to property clearly owned, occupied, and filed under county deed as belonging to Mr. Harding? Karen gave a tight smile, clearly rehearsed. It was a miscommunication. I was led to believe. Led by whom? Joe cut in. She faltered. The contractor now possibly misunderstood the coordinates. Joe tapped the stack of emails. Your contractor misunderstood the coordinates after receiving these detailed instructions, including a diagram you labeled preferred alternate route, less resistance. One of her lawyers objected, but the court reporter was already typing. And that phrase, less resistance, hung in the air like a guillotine. Then came the bombshell. The county investigator entered the room mid-session. He walked over to the judge's clerk, whispered something, then approached Karen directly. He had a warrant in hand. Ms. Dupre, he said clearly, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit fraud, and unlawful diversion of protected water resources. Karen blinked. Excuse me. You have the right to remain silent, he continued. Anything you say. Her chair screeched as she shot up. This is outrageous. I was acting in the best interest of the community. That's what they all say, the officer muttered, motioning for the deputy to cuff her. The moment was surreal. The Queen of Conformity, dragged out in front of her own board, still barking about bylaws as the door shut behind her. For a second, I just sat there, stunned. And then I smiled, not out of cruelty, but relief. She wasn't above the law. Not anymore. But the storm didn't stop with Karen. The contractor's cooperation had opened a floodgate of evidence. Turns out, several board members knew about the unauthorized dig. One of them had even approved funds marked as community beautification to pay for the pipe installation. Another had signed off on the expedited installation plan, knowing full well it crossed private boundaries. 2 days later, the district attorney filed a civil suit against the entire HOA for negligence, environmental violation, and conspiracy to defraud. Their insurance dropped them. Their lawyer resigned. Residents started bailing from HOA meetings like rats from a sinking ship. The headlines hit the local news cycle hard. Stonebrook Ranch, HOA president arrested in land theft scandal. I became the unwilling face of resistance, the lone landowner who said no and meant it. And you know what? I wore it proudly. As the gavel came down at the end of the hearing, the judge ordered full removal of all unauthorized infrastructure at the HOA's expense, $100,000 personal fine for Karen, HOA restitution totaling over $600,000 for legal damages, ecological repair, and personal compensation. One reporter tried to catch me outside the courthouse. Mr. Harding, do you feel like justice was served? I looked past the cameras to where Karen was being loaded into the back of a patrol cruiser, still hurling threats about appeals and decency. I shrugged. Justice didn't just get served. It brought dessert. The day they tore up the last inch of pipe from my land felt like a personal Independence Day. At 7:03 a.m., sharp, the sound of diesel engines filled the air as a fleet of heavy-duty excavators rolled down my gravel drive. Bright orange safety vest, surveyors with digital transits, engineers with clipboards. It was like watching a military operation, and I was the 5-star general standing on home turf. Only difference, this battle had already been won. The excavation crew had been hired by the court-appointed enforcement officer, not the HOA. That was important. This wasn't just removal. This was erasure. Every foot of pipe, every fraudulent flag, every inch of disturbed earth was coming out under court order. And the best part? HOA was footing the full 6-figure bill, interest included. I stood at the southern edge of my land with a thermos of black coffee, wearing my old work boots and a smug grin I didn't even try to hide. The site supervisor walked over. You Mr. Harding? That's me. We'll have this all out in 2 days. Maybe less. Once we're done, land will be leveled, regraded, and compacted. You want to seed it? I took a long sip, then smiled. No, I've got other plans. They got to work fast. Massive jaws tore through soil and pipe like paper. Chunks of PVC snapped under pressure, yanked out like rotten teeth. And every time a section was pulled from the ground, I felt a piece of the intrusion leave with it. Like I was reclaiming my breath. Neighbors came by to watch, even some from Stonebrook Ranch. The ones who'd always seemed too timid to speak up before. Now they stood at the edge of my fence, hands in pockets, quiet admiration in their eyes. A couple gave me a thumbs up. One woman brought over homemade lemon bars and said, "For the man who stood his ground." By the second afternoon, the last trench had been closed. The stream bed, once partially diverted, now flowed freely again. And I swear, the water looked cleaner, like even the land itself was relieved. I planted 2 live oaks right at the corner near where the unauthorized line had started. I named them Justice and Boundary, but I wasn't done. That weekend, I rented a concrete mixer and set 10-foot poles into the ground along the southern border, every 30 feet. Solid steel cores, poured and cured by hand. Atop each one, I welded a cast iron eagle, wings outstretched, not because I had to, but because I could. And then came the crown jewel, a custom sign, big, bold, and unmistakable. Burnished steel, hand-etched lettering, bolted to 2 concrete pillars at the property's entrance. It read, "Welcome to Harding Land. Private, protected, permanent. Want to dig a trench? Better dig deep, into your legal budget." When I finally stepped back to admire the work, the setting sun cast long golden rays over my field, the barn glowing like an old ship returning home. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Total unshakable peace. No flags, no trespass, no HOA. That night, I grilled steaks under the stars with my dog Ringo at my side, a cold beer in hand, and a playlist of outlaw country rolling out from the barn speakers. There was no sound of distant lawnmowers, no prying eyes, just cicadas, crackling fire, and the deep exhale of land that belonged to me again, and only me. After months of deception, invasion, and courtroom warfare, my land was mine, restored, and stronger than ever. And it would stay that way. A month after the last chunk of pipe was pulled, I threw a party. Not just any party, the first annual Harding Don't Touch My Land barbecue and pipe funeral. Invitations went out on wood-burn plaques, local beer was delivered by the keg, and I even got a guy from the county to bring a backhoe for show and tell. Word got around fast. By noon, half the town had shown up, including a surprising number of Stonebrook Ranch residents. The quiet ones, the apology ones, the Karen never represented us ones. The highlight of the afternoon, a 3-layer cake shaped like a severed PVC pipe, frosted with the words, "In memory of HOA pipe dreams, may they forever rest in pieces." When it came time to make a toast, I stood on the back of my tractor, raised a mason jar full of sweet tea, and said, "To property lines, good fences, better neighbors, and the freedom to not have someone else's plumbing in your pasture." The crowd whooped. Someone lit sparklers. My dog Ringo took off chasing a frisbee into the field, like he'd been waiting his whole life for that moment. As the sun dipped low, folks began wandering toward the new sign I directed by the gate, just past the spot where the old trench had once cut deep. It had lights now, solar-powered, motion-activated, and it glowed like a monument. Underneath the bold private property heading, I'd added a second plaque, this one for laughs. Warning, unauthorized digging may result in sudden legal excavation. Someone from the local paper asked if I'd consider running for office. I told him I'd think about it, as long as I didn't have to sit in any more HOA meetings. As the fire crackled and folks began dancing barefoot in the grass, I looked around and realized something unexpected. This land had never felt more alive. Not just mine, shared in the right way. Not by force, not by scheming, but by respect, by boundary, by truth. Karen never showed up. Rumor has it she moved to another state with less rural resistance. Good. Texas'll recover. Me. I stayed right here, right where I belonged, standing tall, hands dirty, and grinning wide beneath a sky that knew no one would ever lay another pipe through my land again.